Kill 'Em All is the debut album by Metallica. Released in 1983, it may not be considered their best album, but it's definitely one of their most important, introducing themselves to the world with what many consider to be the first thrash metal album, and it contains songs that the band still play to this day. Formed only 2 years prior to its release, the lineup underwent a significant change just prior to recording the album, with original lead guitarist and future Megadeth frontman Dave Mustaine being booted out of the band just before recording began. Mustaine's writing and playing was a prominent feature of the demo they titled No Life Till Leather, which was released in 1982. This demo was the catalyst for the creation of Megaforce Records, set up by Johnny Zazula, an independent record store owner who believed in the band enough to get them off the ground with their first release. The introduction of Kirk Hammett as replacement for Mustaine proved to be a little nerve-wracking for Johnny, as he loved Mustaine's work on the songs they were about to record for the album. He asked Kirk to reproduce Mustaine's parts note for note. Naturally, Kirk wasn't exactly enamoured with this idea, but was reluctant to push back too much, as he'd only been with the band for less than a month at this stage. Kirk had been playing with Exodus, and had been under the tutelage of Joe Satriani, so although he was fresh to the Metallica setup, he certainly knew his way around a fretboard. Despite this, he still played Mustaine's solo parts, albeit with a little interpretation, but the main riffs were note for note. This meant Kirk didn't receive a writing credit on the album, with those going to Mustaine. With budget a primary concern for Megaforce owner Johnny, the choice of studio in which to record their debut was fairly limited. In the end, they made the trip from west to east coast and entered Music America Studios in Rochester, New York, with producer Paul Curcio. Johnny said, "We sent them $1,500 to come across the country. They got a one-way rental, a U-Haul van and a truck. Literally, they had 2 drivers, and they slept in the back with all their gear. And they arrived at my front door. It was basically, 'We're here, what do we do next?'" Lars said. The actual studio was in the basement of this huge old colonial type of clubhouse. On the second floor, there was a huge ballroom, perfect for getting a good drum sound. Paul Curcio had a lot of experience recording artists such as the Doobie Brothers, but none when it came to thrash metal. In his opinion, the demo was too distorted and wanted the band to dial it down a bit for clarity, of course missing the entire point of the sound of metal. Luckily for the band, they had some allies in the studio, with the young engineers, who were aware of the sound they were after. Andy Wroblewski was one of the engineers that got what Metallica were all about, and acted as an essential go-between for the band and producer. As mentioned by Lars, the dining room above the studio proved to be an important part of the album's sound, with the drums being recorded in there in an attempt to recreate the sound of John Bonham's drums from Led Zeppelin 4, where Bonham was placed at the bottom of a country mansion stairwell to amplify the natural reverberation that the huge space provided. Looking at a picture of the drum mic setup, you can see typical close mics used with the Sennheiser MD421s on the toms and AKG C451s for cymbals. I presume there's a Shure SM57 on the snare, and it looks like an MD421 on the kick. The room mics aren't visible, which is odd, considering they were going for a big room sound. So I presume they would have been placed at quite a distance from the kit to pick up the room. They even tried putting Lars in the bathroom to capture the reflections of the bare walls. This was mainly for toms, but according to Kirk, this didn't work so well. One of the reasons was that Lars was getting too scared at the prospect of confronting a ghost. He reported the sighting of figures walking past the bathroom and his cymbals spinning without being touched. He was so petrified, Andy the engineer ended up sitting with him to keep him company and ward away any paranormal interventions. The drum kit Lars used was a Maple Camco Renaissance kit that he'd recovered in black, with the original wrap being quite a bit lighter. This kit was later stolen, just before the recording of Ride the Lightning, and is yet to be found in the wild, but someone somewhere could be playing this very kit without knowing its provenance. Another piece of gear that was stolen in the same incident was Hetfield's guitar amp. His amp at the time was very much his pride and joy, a Marshall Superlead Model 1959. This was paired with a Marshall 1960B 4x12 speaker cabinet, lightly containing Celestion G12 65 speakers. An important step before the natural distortion of the amp was the Proco Rat pedal, adding a bit more crunch to the tone and giving it some edge. Importantly, the amp also had the Jose volume mod, which alters the tone further to complete his sound. This amp was bought for James by Lars's parents, who were very much behind the band and their quest to be the best and have the best equipment. When the amp was stolen in Boston in '83, James was devastated, prompting him to write Fade to Black. His guitar from the album was his Electra Flying V, which was a copy of a Gibson, with even the truss rod cover sporting the Gibson logo. I went into more detail on this guitar in my Ride the Lightning video, which you can find on this channel if you want to know more. Kirk also had a Flying V, but his was a genuine 78 or 79 Gibson in black. He used James's amp for the recording, likely also using the Rat pedal, as his usual choice of the Tube Screamer had just been stolen at the time apparently. Cliff was using his Rickenbacker 4001 into either a Sun Beta bass amp head or PV Mark IV Series 400, as he appears to be using both at the time. For distortion, he used the Morley Power boost pedal. The band worked from noon until midnight for 17 days, surviving on cheap beer and pizza, and constantly checking what they'd recorded in Andy's Chevy Impala to hear how it sounded with the all-important car test. For the final mixing, the band weren't present, and when they heard it, it was clear to them and Johnny that it wasn't the record they wanted to hear. The main issue was the tone and level of the guitars. They were much too tame and really not cutting through the mix as they should. In the end, Johnny even remortgaged his house in order to get the mixes corrected. After the remix, the guitars were now fizzing as they intended, and the album was now ready for release. All it needed now was a title, but their first suggestion, Metal Up Your Ass, with a sleeve depicting a hand holding a machete emerging from a toilet bowl, was denied by Megaforce distributors, as they argued that the stores wouldn't want to stock the record, considering it too offensive. Cliff, annoyed by this, shouted, "These record company dudes, kill 'em all, just kill 'em all," and there their debut title was born. Zazula had enlisted photographer Gary L. Hurd to do the front cover of the album, as well as the band's portrait on the back, Hammett said. That's when Cliff mentioned something about wanting there to be a bloody hammer on the cover, but then Cliff carried a hammer with him everywhere he went. He always had a hammer in his luggage, and he would take it out occasionally and start destroying things. Only 1,500 copies were initially pressed, which, given its importance and subsequent worldwide success, seems incredibly small. It actually went on to sell 3 million copies in the US alone, far outselling their initial estimates. Despite the tight budget and last-minute crucial band member replacement, Metallica managed to define the genre of thrash metal with its first proper album, with their debut single Whiplash embodying its ethos, a 200 BPM steam train of a performance that would later be covered by one of their inspirations, Motorhead, winning them a Grammy. Metallica's influence on metal and rock in general started right here with Kill 'Em All. It would still be years before they established themselves as one of the world's biggest bands, but you can hear seeds of their eventual conquest in this explosive debut.
I want to say to everybody out there,
Metal up your ass!
okay, thank you. This is Donna Davis, and this is Metallica.